So this course, as I mentioned, it's an 8-week course where we start from the basics of Linux. So of course, people can come from different backgrounds. So some people have already some knowledge of Linux, some are completely new to Linux. So we actually start from the scratch. We start from exactly what Linux is and how do you start from installation and the basic environment, basic setup, basic configurations, and then going to a little bit more advanced, like creating users and groups, controlling permissions, using different editors, and of course we end with the networking basics, networking enabling communication between different Linux systems, and also a small project at the end where we configure our own web server. So let's get started. First of all, before we get into the Linux detail or technical part of it, let's talk about this course. What exactly is the course structure? What can you expect from this course? And what is expected from your side for this course, right? So first thing, it is going to be once a week. So the idea is that we don't want to bombard you with a lots and lots of commands and configuration every single day that you can't follow up. So we actually go in a more uh, relaxed manner. We cover something, a particular topic, a week, and then you get the whole week to practice it so that you become very comfortable with it before starting the next part. So sessions will be 2 hours per session. Although I always say this in all my classes, CCIE, CCNP classes, or Linux or AWS classes, that these are topic-driven sessions, not the time-driven sessions. So sometimes some topics are finished before 2 hours as well. Some might take a little bit more than 2 hours as well. So depend on the topic, not on the duration, right? So it's going to be an 8 weeks course because this is just covering the basics, Linux basics. But of course, our 52-week program, which is pre-recorded, is a very detailed certification-oriented course for Red Hat Enterprise Linux certifications, RHCSA and RHCE. So what we want to do in this course, like this 8-week course also, is want to start from the hands-on right from the day one. So you will see that when we start the configuration from next week, we will immediately start with the installation and start configuring things, setting up environment and everything, not just the theory part. So it's a completely hands-on program. And also the software OS image recommendations and lab instructions along with the solutions are provided in this course. So anytime we are covering anything, like for example, if we are covering the concept of users and groups, and I'm explaining you how exactly users and groups interact, what is the logic of creating them, what are the important files and commands, I'm going to send you all the commands information after the class. So you will have the document as well, along with the practice solution, like how exactly you can do it, right? All right, so you have a question?
Yes, does the 8 weeks officially kick off this week, or would it be next week? Is this mostly a decorum and structure, or are we going into configuration right away?
So today is only the introduction part. So the actual configuration will start from next week. And depending on how many topics we have, it actually takes 7 to 8 weeks. So we can actually include this session as well into the 8 weeks.
Okay, if perchance we don't cover everything in a session, would you extend it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
So the idea is that whatever we have planned or whatever the course curriculum we have designed, we need to finish it. So if it takes more time also, that's completely fine. And sometimes what happens, uh, life happens. Sometimes you might not be available on a day, or I might not be available on a day. Then if we have to cancel that week, of course, that will also be extended and covered later.
Fantastic.
And also, live Zoom sessions are recorded. So access to these recordings will be available on the course web portal. So if you want to watch it again, want to go through it again, you can do it. And these recordings will be available for lifetime. So you have a lifetime access to this and also the 52-week program. So anytime, if any update happens, and this is something we have done many times in CCNA and CCNP as well, that if something new is added to the course or something is removed, we always update our online portal with the new videos, and they will be available to all the students, even if they purchased it before. For example, we have some students back in 2018 who purchased CCNA, and CCNA had been revised 2 times after that, and new topics were added. So we created these new videos, added them to the portal, and of course they are available to them also. So if they want to update on new technology, that will be completely free of cost. No added charges would be for that. That's the lifetime access information. For example, in RHCE also they now have Ansible based configurations which were not there before. So now all the new videos that we are adding, they are also available to people who bought like a couple of years back or 3 years back. So that is another benefit you get from this class, right? And this is what I was mentioning earlier, membership to the Facebook community group, where questions can be asked, and I will be answering there, and some other students can also answer or may get benefit from the answers provided there. And as I mentioned earlier, lifetime access to all the recordings, whether it is Linux, AWS, or any other courses. Like we have many Cisco courses as well, Juniper courses as well. So all of them have the recordings available, and they are accessible for lifetime. So there's the course structure, but what is exactly covered in this one? So first of all, we are talking about this live class, which is 8 weeks only. So we wanted to concentrate only on the basics. So we only cover the basics in this course. A little bit of advance, I would say, when it comes to groups, permissions, and networking. But of course, this is just to get you started and accelerated on your 52 weeks program and make you more comfortable. So don't worry, anything advanced is definitely also covered into the 52-week program. So what we cover in this one is we start with the introduction to the Linux kernel, Linux distros, and the desktop environment. So what exactly is Linux, and what is the difference between a kernel and so many different distros, and what is the difference between CLI and GUI, the GUI which is called the desktop environment. We'll also cover the details of OS partitions and directories. So what happens is that when you install Linux for the first time, you see that there are many directories into the root folder. What exactly do we use these directories for? Home directory, root directory, opt directory, temp directory, so boot directory. So all these directories, what are the objectives of these, and are they important or not important, or are they used? Like bin, sbin directory, usr directories. So we need to understand the meaning of them, the use case of them, and the importance of them. And what happens is, so many times that you create sometimes different partitions for a particular directory if they are very important. Like home directory, where you have all the user profiles, generally it is kept on a separate partition. So if there is a failure into the system, then it is not going to affect any user data or the people who are using the system. Same way, root directory and the boot partition, boot directory is generally in a different partition we call boot partition. So these are the recommendations and best practices which we are going to cover into the partition part as well. We'll also cover the Linux installation, of course. So we will see how we can install Linux using the GUI or just the CLI. And also we are going to cover what partitions are recommended by Red Hat Enterprise Linux and by some other distros that you should create. And if you leave it to the system, how is it going to structure the partitions? That also something you can do. If you are completely new and you are not sure how many partitions you will need and all, you can let the system also decide it for you. Also, after that, we are going to introduce the CLI, because Linux, you will see the main power of Linux is its CLI, command line infrastructure. So many times you will see that when we have the servers, they don't even have the GUI module, because GUI module is not needed. Servers are generally, these are headless servers created for some certain purpose, database server, web server, or some kind of file system or FTP server. So they don't need the GUI, they just need the CLI, and that actually saves resources also. So CLI is extremely important, and we'll start with the basic commands, and this will take the biggest part, biggest chunk of this 8 weeks, the basic commands, which will go through a few weeks, and we'll cover, although we are calling them basic, but they are also certain a little bit of advanced as well, and important commands to comfortably manage and use Linux operating system. Another very important thing you will see, and the main difference between different Linux distros, is the package management. Package is the software. So in Windows, we install the software. Here in Linux, we call them packages. So the package manager is the software or the application which allows you or which helps you to install packages, manage packages, delete them, upgrade them. All these things you can do using a package manager. And there are two different types of package managers: low level and high level package manager. Low level package managers do not resolve the dependencies. What it means is that some softwares or some packages, they need some other libraries or packages to be also installed for them to work properly. They are called dependencies. So low-level package managers is not going to resolve the dependencies for you. You need to know what other packages will also be needed and need to install them as well. But if you're using a high-level package manager, it finds out all the dependencies and install them as well. So you will see that different distros, they have different package management system, and we are going to see the both variations, the two big variations, which are they are Reddit based and Debian based. Yeah, Jonathan, you have a question?
Oh, so pardon me, we're going to be working with the more advanced package managers or the lower source.
So advanced one also we are going to cover, but in the 52-week program. So here we are just going to mention them that there are like low-level RPM package management is also there, but
Okay.
we are just going to understand the configuration or the practical part of the high-level package management, like DNF for Reddit or apt for Debian based.
Okay, so what do most companies use nowadays, the high or the lower ones?
They all use the higher one now. I
Yeah.
mean, there are few administrators who like to deal more in the in-depth stuff and like to deal with the particular dependencies. So in some certain scenarios, you can use the low-level package manager, but mostly the high-level package managers are what companies use. For example, if you have an RPM file from someone actually sent you an RPM file, just like unauthorized software, not available on the repository, then you might have to use the low level one because it's not possible to use the high level package manager if it is not into the repository, which we call
Like,
repo in short.
makes sense.
Right. And one of the very important thing of Linux is the Linux file system. So Linux file system, as I mentioned earlier, the different directories that we create, but also what kind of what kind of formatting we are going to do for these directories or partitions. So in Windows we have NTFS file system, MS DOS, or uh, the the different file system that we have. They actually decide the size of the file that you can create, or the naming structure that you can use, what level of security you are going to get for that file. All these things are actually decided by the file system. So if you're using FAT file system, FAT32 NTFS in Windows, similarly in Linux also you have many different options. So you have ext2, 3, 4, or XFS file system, and BTRFS file system. So these file systems, what is the pros and cons of using one over the other, and what are the default? For example, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, like the latest one is version 9, RHEL9. It actually defaults to the XFS file system, and that's what Red Hat recommends also. So we are going to understand the differences between them and which one would be a good use case in different scenarios. That is something we'll learn as well. And of course, we will see the command that is used to format the file system, although more detail will be into the 52-week course because this is just the basic part of it. Another thing which is very important for any Linux system is the users and groups. So we have a root user account, which is the super user, and this user account has all the permissions. So it can do everything, it can destroy everything as well. Unlike Windows, Linux is not going to stop you if you are the root user. So if you want to delete the boot partition, Linux will say, okay, you are the root user and you really want to do that, then go ahead. And of course, your system will become unusable after that. So nobody stops root user to do anything. That's why we don't use the root user account for the day-to-day task. It's too powerful for its own usage, right? That's why we use the normal user accounts. We create user accounts, or we create the groups. We associate the permissions to the groups, and then we just add the users as the member of the different groups. And whenever we want to do something which needs the elevated permissions or elevated privileges, like root level privileges, we can use the switch user do command or sudo command, which actually switches the user account to the root user temporarily just to execute that command, and then comes back to the normal privilege of the user. That actually also safeguard your system from any kind of attacks. So if some kind of malware or a virus has taken control of your system, they will only be able to do whatever the user can do. So only the user level of permission. So if you have logged in as root user account and some kind of malware has attacked, it might actually do more damage than versus a normal user account. So that's the recommended best practice. So we'll see how to create user accounts, group accounts, how to add users to different groups, and how we can elevate the privileges to use the root user commands. Also, users and groups are very important for the next topic, which is the file and directory permissions. So this is kind of a slightly advanced topic. For example, we are going to cover different files and directories, something like this. You can see here, where we'll talk about what exactly are the permissions for the user, what are the permissions for the group, and what is the permission for everyone else. What exactly do we mean by read, write, execute, and the examples of numerical permissions called the octal values uh, versus the byte level permission, where we use the R, W, or X keyword for read, write, execute. Just to give you an example. So these kind of things we are going to cover. So this is slightly advanced, but we are covering it here so that we can see the use case of users and groups. That why do we need to create users and groups other than safeguarding your system? For that, one user would have been enough. But in a company, if you have a server which is shared by multiple users, you do need to create multiple user accounts, and you do need to control the permissions. So we are going to cover that part as well. And also, we are going to talk about the editors. So editors, text editors is not actually a very big thing. For example, we use Notepad in Windows, but you will see in Linux, you have some simple text editors. You can again call them high level like Nano, where it's easier to understand how exactly to use them right from the CLI. And then you have some low level editors like VI, which have a slight learning curve. You need to understand because everything is done using the alphanumeric keys. Different commands are there. That's why it has command mode and the insert mode where you can type something. In command mode, every key, even alphabetic keys, have different meanings and different instructions. So it's important to learn both so that you can see which one do you like to use more. For example, many advanced administrators, they like to use VI. Many of them hate VI. They say no, we don't need that extra added complexity when the Nano can do all the things that we need to do. But to be honest, VI does have a learning curve. But once you learn those things, you will find that it's faster and more efficient to use comparing to high level editors like Nano. There are other editors as well, like I think there's one called Emacs, which is very good for programmability because it has different colors and structures. It looks nice. So that is something also you can install and use. And then of course there are other editors as well. If you like a particular one, you can always download the package and start using that as well. And we are going to end it with two important things. One is the networking basics and connecting two Linux servers. So basically I'm saying Linux server, but connecting one Linux server to a Linux client. And what is the difference between a server and a client? To be honest, both are Linux kernel. So it's just that which services you have activated. So on a particular device, if I have activated GUI and I'm using it to watch Netflix and I have a complete desktop environment, I'm using it to watch movies, create documents, just like my day-to-day computer, then it will be called a client because I'm using it to access resources on other devices. So it's a client. But in the same system, if I configure web servers on that, or if I configure a DHCP or DNS server and start providing services to other computers, then it will become a Linux server. So you can see that it's not the hardware, it is the services that makes it a server or a client. So we are basically going to use two Linux devices and we are going to configure networking between them so that we can see how to enable communication between them, first thing. And second thing, how we can access one device from the other using secure shell, and also how to copy the files securely between them using SCP, secure copy command, right? So that is something we will learn. And then of course, we will end it with a project where we will create an Apache web server. And we'll also introduce Nginx web server, which is another uh, solution for the same thing to create a web server. And what different steps do we need? What do we exactly need to configure? And then how we can access this web server either from our host machine, like I'm using Windows 11, so from here, or from another Linux client, how we can access this website and see if it is working properly or not. Also, in the web server, we are going to see both variations, HTTP and HTTPS. So if you want to configure web service without security, you can use HTTP. But if you want to encrypt the complete session, you have to use HTTPS, the secure variation of it, which we are going to cover as well. right? So that will complete our curriculum for this 8-week program.
Yeah, I
Just
see.
a second.
Understood. So where does the Kali Linux come in?
So Kali Linux is not part of this, as I mentioned that.
Oh, you said.
Yeah, so RHCE SA and RHCE certification that we are aiming for the 52-week program as well, that actually doesn't involve any ethical hacking. So we will create another program for cybersecurity where we will cover the Kali Linux as well, Security Plus, Kali Linux, and also Certified Ethical Hacking (CES) certification. There we are going to cover the Kali Linux in more detail. But one thing is for sure that these basic information that you are learning here or advanced information that you will learn in the 52-week program is definitely going to help you to get on board on Kali Linux as well. Because once you install Kali Linux, you will see that it is nothing but the set of packages which are basically hacking packages, or the packages which can help you to breach security or to check security, to mitigate security risk. So these are just extra packages that they're installing there. So it's not that it's a completely different kernel. It's the same kernel. Whatever you will learn in this course will help you immensely to maneuver and to navigate through that system as well. But then you will have to learn extra packages which are particular for hacking and all these purposes, right? So that is a completely different course, I would say. All right. So the next thing is, what kind of tools are we going to use in this course? So you will see that for most of the topics that we covered in the last slide, like the topics covered, you will need just a single Linux system. So to install the Linux, to check the file system, and to go through all the basic commands that we are going to cover. Also, even creating users groups and controlling file permissions, all the way up to that point, editors also, you need a single Linux server. So you can use any one of those, and that will be more than enough. But when it comes to networking and the web server project, it's better to have at least two servers or two Linux devices, one server, one client. So for that, you can use actually VMware. So if you're using a Linux system already, you can use KVM also to install virtual machines. Or if you really have two physical servers, you can connect them using Ethernet cable. But if you don't want to do that, and if you're using a Windows system, you can use VMware, or you can use the virtual box solution. So what we are doing in this course, we are using the VMware Workstation Player, which is the free version from VMware, and you can download it from VMware website. But if you feel any issue in downloading, you can also download from the link I provided you, the Dropbox link. From there, you can download it. And individual Linux OS will be installed directly in the VMware using their ISO file, right? So let's say if you downloaded the ISO for RHEL 9 and also the ISO for, let's say, Linux Mint, then you can install them separately as two different virtual machines. And VMware will take care of the underlying networking for them, right? And how is it going to do that? It is going to use the same network type, the internal switch which the VMware has, that will be used for that. So you will see that in VMware, we are going to use the network type NAT, network address translation. So what it will allow you to do is it will allow you to enable communication between different Linux systems that you have installed as separate virtual machines, but also it will allow you to communicate with the host machine. Like I am using Windows 11, so my Linux systems will be able to communicate with my Windows 11 system, and you will also be able to access internet via the host. So if you want to install some packages, download some packages, upgrade them, anything you need internet for, you will be able to do that if you use the type net, right? So this will allow the Linux and the host machine also to communicate, as I mentioned. Also, for most part of the course, as I mentioned, only one Linux machine would be enough. For networking part, we will need two machines, server and the client. Now, in case if you don't want to use VMware Workstation, you can also use the VirtualBox, which is the Oracle solution, Oracle VirtualBox. In that case, you should use the network type bridged. Although we are not using VirtualBox, so if there is any other issue other than the basic networking, we might not be able to help you. But VMware Workstation, if you are using, we use it every day for different training purposes. So we know exactly what exactly you can do to fix issues, right? And speaking of VMware, when you install a virtual machine, you can actually go to the settings and just make sure that you have enough memory. Like if you are going to install the GUI, I would recommend at least 2 to 4 gig of RAM for a machine to have a smooth experience. And network adapter type should be set to net so that it can leverage your host machine internet connectivity and connect to host machine, connect to other Linux virtual machines, and also will be able to connect to the internet. Right. So that's the course structure. And that's exactly how we are going to continue with the basics of the configuration, right? So I just wanted to cover the basics today and just to introduce the course. So we are going to start with the Linux introduction from next week. So basically, you can also consider the 8 weeks will start from the next week. We just wanted to introduce you this. And one more thing I want to show you before we finish is I'm going to send you a file, a PDF file, the links to download the Linux operating system. So which kind of operating system are we going to use in this course? So you will see that there are different types of distros available, but the two main branches are Debian based and Red Hat based. So Debian based Linux systems, whether it is Debian Linux itself, or if you're using Ubuntu or Linux Mint or Pop OS, these are the variations of Debian based Linux. They actually use a package manager called apt. So if you want to install a new package, apt install or apt remove, apt update, these commands are used. But if you're using Red Hat based system, the package manager is yum, or the new keyword for yum is DNF. So you use yum install or DNF install and all these commands. So the keyword starts with DNF. So the reason I'm telling you this is that you cannot go wrong with any of the distro when it comes to the basics, because when you learn Linux basics, you're talking about the commands which are into the Linux kernel. So the distro basically is the upper layer where they have some uh, distro specific GUI, or the package management will be different. Some high level things will be different, as you can see. So you cannot go wrong with either of those. So if you ask me, should I use Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or should I use Ubuntu, or should I use Linux Mint for this code? So my answer would be you are free to choose, because ultimately they all support the basic commands on the same level. But
Would it be
talking
helpful?
about, yeah, go ahead.
Would it be helpful to? I don't know if I have enough RAM to download both, just to get familiarity with both. Would that be helpful? Has that been an approach in the past
Yes,
before?
yes. Actually, that's a very good point, and that's highly recommended to actually install both. And that you will see that that's what I recommend also later. That for because we in our class also we will use two things: server and a client. So for the server, I recommend using Red Hat Enterprise Linux or Rocky Linux. So basically, Rocky Linux is the bug by bug copy of the Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So you will learn all the same things that you would learn in RHEL 9. The difference is that RHEL 9, although it is free, but it is subscription based. So you have to create a subscription which is called the Red Hat Developer Subscription, which allows you to freely use RHEL 9 and register it. But you will need to register it as well, or you need to disable subscription management. So some extra steps are needed here. But if you're using Rocky Linux, you get exactly same command, but you don't need to register anything. It's completely free. It's a bug by bug copy of the RHEL 9. Or you can also use Alma Linux, which is another variation of the same RHEL 9, right? But it is not exactly identical. So Rocky Linux is better in that case. So server side, I recommend RHEL 9 or Rocky Linux. But for the client side, you can see I also mentioned Linux Mint, which is basically the Debian based Linux, right? Which itself, it is based on Ubuntu, which itself is
Yeah.
based on Debian. So installing this would be a good idea. And to answer your second question, you don't need much RAM, to be honest. Even if you give 2 gig RAM to each, like overall 4 gig RAM, that will be
Yeah.
more than sufficient. Yeah. And also, when VMware is configured with the with the RAM for these systems, you will see that it doesn't use all of it immediately. It gradually starts using more RAM if you are using the system more and installing more things or doing some graphical intensive thing, right? So don't worry, 2 gig each will also be enough. So how much RAM do you have in your system?
I think 4, I believe.
Oh, 4 gig only. Okay. So yeah, I would say that if you had 8 gig, that would have been better. But in the 4 gig, then I would suggest you one thing is that when you install the server, you will see that when the installation, and of course we'll cover installation as well. So that time I will show you that you can
Oh.
deselect the GUI. So what happens with that is that only the CLI will be installed, and that's all we need actually for this class. We don't need the GUI. So then you can actually give only 1 gig RAM also to the server, and that will be more than sufficient.
Pardon me, I have eight. Pardon me.
So yeah, I was saying that when you install the Linux, then that time
I have 8 GB. I just confirmed now on my my settings. I do have 8 GB.
oh, perfect. Yeah, then no need to worry at all. Yeah, so you can
Yeah.
give 2 gig each and forget about it. It will work perfectly fine. So yeah, and also in this document, I explain that you can use whatever you like, but in our case, we are going to use in our class when I am explaining you some topics, I am going to use RHEL 9, Rocky Linux, and I am also going to use Fedora and Linux Mint so that we can get the experience of all four of these. Fedora and Linux Mint are generally considered client side, and the reason is because they have more packages. Like Linux Mint is very similar to Windows 11. When you install it, it also installs some codecs so that you can right away start watching videos, or if you want to do some video editing, you want to have some documentation. You have some task for documentation creation or PPT or all. So LibreOffice is also already installed. So it is more aligned to your day-to-day tasks, right? That's why they call them client. But is it possible that we configure a web server on Linux Mint? Absolutely 100%. Because Linux Mint, at the end of the day, it is also a Linux kernel. So you can make it a full-fledged server. Absolutely no issue at all. So these are just the tags we call client, server and client, but you can decide which one you want to use. So for you, I would recommend you should download Rocky Linux because you don't need to worry about registration in that case, and no need to create an account on RHEL 9. Although that's also not actually very difficult. Right? A developer platform, if you go, you can create an account, and then you can use this command subscription manager register from the CLI to register your system. But Rocky Linux, you don't need to worry about that. And for the client, I would recommend Linux Mint. So that server you will have Reddit based, and client you will have Debian based, basically, right?
Yes.
And this file I'm going to send you after the class, and you can actually use this file as a reference because you can see that I have some links also to directly download the ISOs for these. But of course, this is something you can find from internet as well. It's not very special, but just everything is at the same place in one document. It's easier to just click and download. That's why I just put them here, right?
Awesome.
Also, time to time, whenever we are, let's say we finish all the basic commands after 2-3 weeks, we will also have some labs. So for example, I will send you after a few weeks, once the basic commands are done, I will send you a lab like this, the basic command lab, where I will give you some instructions. You need to do some things based on your knowledge what you gained in last few weeks of basic command configuration, where we list also echo command, creating directories, copying files, moving files, and sorting and finding information. So some creating symbolic links, hard links, and also printing the content of a file. Compression is another very basic thing that we should do. So all these questions will be there. And when you are doing this, if you get stuck somewhere, of course you can go back to the video recording. You can also refer to the PPT I will send you every week with all the commands. But also from the second page onward, there is solution as well. So you can see the solution file and see exactly how it is done. And if a particular solution doesn't make any sense, you can definitely ask questions as well, that why is it done like this and not like that, and we can always discuss. Because in Linux, there are always many ways to do the same thing. So it's not that one is right, second is wrong, but just multiple ways to do it, right?